Grandma, can I have the chocolate chips?
This secret recipe moment made possible by Emory Heart and Vascular Center. When Grandma needed heart care, she came to Emory. The difference? Emory Healthcare performs more heart procedures annually than anyone else in Georgia, which means better outcomes for our patients. And we offer advanced and personalized treatments developed by our top specialists that others don't. Like Grandma knows, where you start your heart care matters. Smart Cookie. EmoryHealthcare.org/smartcookie.
Attention Talking Simpsons listeners, we have a new podcast miniseries exclusively on Patreon right now.
For $5 and up subscribers at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons, you get Talk King of the Hill Season 2, Part 1.
That's right, we're returning to King of the Hill once again, putting out 11 new episodes covering the first half of the show's second season. Again, that is patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Be there or be not right.
Cartoons from present and the past. Every week will be an animated bash. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! Maybe a short but mostly shows. We'll talk, we'll analyze, exploring as we go. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What a Cartoon, where we work 48 hours a day for der listener. I'm one of your hosts, the Statue of Liberty kisser, Bob Mackey, and this is an audio exploration of every cartoon ever who is here with me today.
Hey, it's Henry Gilbert, and I also haven't been released from the Disney Vault in 60 years.
And today's episode is all about the cartoon, Der Fuhrer's Face.
Am I glad to be a citizen of the United States of America?
And Henry, where were you on January 1st, 1943?
Not yet born for another 39 years.
Me too. But this is a patron pick, right?
Yes, this is from our premium patron Loki, who has chosen a lot of good cartoons before, and he wanted to do this as his final $50 request. And why? Loki says, I've always been fascinated with World War II and love Disney cartoons. So when I happened upon the Walt Disney Treasures DVD set all about World War II one day, I immediately bought it and watched as much as I could when I got home. I was very surprised to see the variety of shorts that Disney produced during the war, from very standard shorts, albeit with a propaganda spin to them, to ones about taxes, rationing, and war bonds, and even educational ones regarding disease and death. Looking forward to your thoughts on the most comedic one they did. Thanks for all the great content. So yes, I'll just say up front that, if you don't want to hear stuff about Nazis and Hitler and World War II and that very real history of it and all the horrors of that, this might not be the episode for you, but this cartoon is one of the most celebrated cartoons of all time by cartoon historians, and it is historically incredibly significant, as are the entire 5 years of World War II related cartoons that were produced.
And it won an Oscar.
It's the first Donald cartoon to ever win an Oscar. Hardly Disney's first Oscar, but the first one starring Donald. I mean, this is a fully established Donald Duck as the lead star of Disney shorts, I think. This is when they decided, fully, they're like, Donald is number one. He is the duck for the 1940s. Mm-hmm. I had heard about this one as the infamous, Nazi Donald cartoon for years and years, but it was so unavailable in the 90s internet age. You'd maybe get one kinescope filmed off of a TV screen thing you'd find on YouTube for the longest time. So I only knew about it out of context, and you see images free of context when also mixed with decades of rumors, or more than rumors, about Walt Disney's own feelings that you think of this film as a different thing than what it was built to be as a piece of propaganda. And it leads to a very complicated history for this film.
I didn't see this movie until I had Netflix send me the Treasury set of World War II cartoons. So I'll tell you what, this cartoon is the edgelord's favorite. If you're on the internet in the early 2000s, you can post a screen cap of Donald Duck dressed as Hitler, or Donald Duck doing the Sieg Heil, and you could be the coolest kid on your block to be like, the Disney made a Nazi cartoon, did you know?
For the aughts, which saw a lot of comedic Hitler jokes that I also think, as we definitely got to learn in the 2010s, some people were not being ironic with their jokes about Hitler and Nazism. They actually really, really meant it and think he's pretty cool, which sucks. But in the aughts, if you were an internet edgelord of like, hey, look at this crazy picture. He's got his arm raised. Isn't that nuts? Like he's got the swastika armband on. You never thought you'd see that from Donald. I mean, the shot of Donald reading Mein Kampf, like that's out of context is a shocking image.
I think people want to believe so many evil things about Walt Disney, and you know what? He was not a great guy. I think they want to believe so many evil things about him that on a recent podcast, I'm not going to name and shame, but they were talking about Walt Disney, and they're talking about how he's anti-Semitic, and somebody said on the podcast, these are people I consider smart, he made cartoons for the Nazis. Yeah. And I think they're thinking about this cartoon, but if you unpack that for a second, the treasured human being all Americans love Walt Disney, how would he be allowed to make cartoons for Adolf Hitler and not be assassinated or executed? Like, think about that for a second. But I think a lot of people see this, or before they were educated about that, before it came out on DVD, people thought, oh, Walt Disney was making cartoons for the Nazis. He was a Nazi sympathizer, and they look at this cartoon without the context of the song and where we were in the war. They just see the stuff of Donald as a Nazi, and they think this is the Nazi Donald cartoon.
And Walt Disney's life and thoughts were so guarded, and especially after his death, really from, I'd say, the 50s onward when he became a television personality and not just a studio head, his reputation was kept so protected, and he is like fully deified. If you watch any documentary original to Disney Plus or any documentary the Walt Disney Company has made in the last 30 years, all of them are like, well, and of course we have to have at least one quote from Walt. I mean, the worshipfulness of him in that way, it is an interesting parallel to the jokes they make about how worshipful you have to be of Hitler if you live in Nazi Germany. I'll just say that.
It's true. And I'm just thinking of how Disney bought The Simpsons, and I wonder if the clock is ticking down on that Nazi Supermen are our superiors joke, because we are recording this right after that Star Wars cartoon came out, and in the Gracie Films logo now is Mickey Mouse.
Yes.
I don't know if he's going to stay there, but I'm thinking, are they going to remove things from the show now, because they seem like Disney's like, we own you now, you make commercials for Star Wars.
It's a bummer. I'll be very sad if they remove Nazi Supermen are my superiors, but jokes like that was how you razz the Disney Company too. If you're like, if you're so sick of the all-American bullshit that is Disney propaganda, then a very easy just like pin you can stick in that balloon is say, Walt Disney hated Jews and was a Nazi. It's like, that's easy to say, and I recount some important bits of history that are like, that isn't something a person who didn't hate Jews would do. Like, but I also think, there's the case to be made that Walt Disney was no more anti-Semitic than the average man of the 1930s, meaning very anti-Semitic by today's standards, but not necessarily a Nazi. And when it was time to join the American war effort against Germany, he was all for it, at the very least, to get all those government checks to make cartoons.
And he was in Hollywood, baby, and there are a lot of Jewish people even back then who were in the business, so he had to work. That doesn't mean he would be immune to anti-Semitism, but he was working with a lot of Jewish folks on a lot of things. But
also I've definitely seen jokes. Even Michael Eisner joked in the Disney War book when he first got hired at Disney. At some meeting, somebody said, like, I don't know if people are going to like you here. And he's like, what? Hey, what? What? And then they're like, because you're from another company. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yes. And by the way, I'm not trying to be the Walt Disney defender. I think he's a piece of shit in a lot of ways. Anti-worker.
Yeah. Well, that's also another angle to the anti-Semitism things against Disney, is that many of socialist workers or organized labor folks of the 30s and 40s, like they were Jewish socialists. So some people argue, like, did he hate him because they're socialists? Did he hate him because they're Jews? It's all kind of mixed together. Like, I don't want this to be the apology tour of like, maybe Walt wasn't that hateful.
Leave the man alone.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, if you think about the early internet days of seeing just these images out of context, that's one thing. To watch the cartoon itself in context in a vacuum, if you try to think like, oh, this is 1943, this is a funny cartoon making fun of an active enemy of America, but it also, even in 1943, though the American public didn't fully know the scope of the incalculable war crimes of Nazi Germany, there were people aware of what Hitler was doing to Jews and other minorities.
Their complaints about the Nazi lifestyle are very bizarre in this cartoon.
Yeah, I think the way I think of it now is, and obviously we didn't live through 1943, but I think from the 1943 perspective, for the same reasons that you could say Walt Disney was probably as anti-Semitic as the normal man was then, if you were doing a cartoon for the average working Joe who's just a white guy and Donald is the white working class, he's the guy who works hard jobs, unfortunately, I think that they probably felt that you'll get a lot more mileage with the common American if you say you have to work really hard and it's extreme rationing, and that's why the Nazis suck, as opposed to the Nazis are committing war crimes against non-white people. Unfortunately, that didn't strike the hearts of many, the average American in 1943. So if you wonder why that's not what this cartoon is about, and even the darker ones like Education of Death, it almost makes you feel empathy for the German people because they're all taught to be, they're like, oh, they've been tricked by Hitler. They've been pushed by Hitler to be so hateful and to march off to war and death. It's different. It is certainly not the historical way of looking back on Nazis and judging them in that way, post-Nuremberg trials even.
I mean, we'll get to it, but it's interesting to see what they fixate on when in the song itself there is reference to the master race. So it's like, well, they understand what Nazis are about, but they're choosing to ignore that part of it.
Yeah, the song mentions the Aryan, like, so you can't even tell yourself, they didn't really know. It's like everybody knew that the Kristallnacht was international news. The many Nuremberg race laws and all of that was news. The relocation of people, that was news. Like, it was news that FDR didn't let refugees in who were trying to escape the Nazis. Like, this was not information that after Hitler blew his brains out in 1945, that's when people were like, whoa, he was doing this. Like, from an American perspective, we were aware of it, but not everybody cared. And we've talked about it before, but one of the things used later by the House of Un-American Activities Committee was to attack people because they're like, you were against Hitler too early.
Pretty suspicious.
Yeah, what do you not like about him? But okay, so there's all the setup, some context. Now let's get into the history of this. First off, I'm going to just do a quick history on Donald Duck from his creation up to 1943, which is only 9 years. So pretty quick. The rise to stardom for Donald Duck is incredible when you map it out. Like, he was really their first breakout star. Like, Mickey looks like crap next to Donald Duck. You know?
He's the real superstar. I mean, I'm looking at the different versions of him. This version wasn't around for long, but I kind of like the early Donald with the longer bill, the more animal-like. It's kind of cute. I want to see more cartoons with that guy.
And his rubber hose body.
Yeah.
I like that too. I also, in an eerie coincidence, Donald Duck's rise to power does kind of mirror Hitler's in the same timeline. But anyway, all right. So 1934, silly symphonies, big hits, Mickey Mouse, a big old star. There's an expanding collection of animal friends. Dippy Dog already exists. By 1934, Walt Disney and his shorts team are still doing what they love to do, which is adapting children's short stories that are in the public domain and making a cartoon version of them. And they really like the one called Little Red Hen, though they will call their short The Wise Little Hen. And they want to have a dumb pig named Peter Pig. Nobody remembers him. But they also think, well, what's another like selfish animal who could learn his lesson about saving corn and actually working hard? The Little Red Hen, if you don't know it, it's the one about the Little Red Hen works so hard growing a bunch of corn, and then the lazy guys are like, you're stupid. And then once it's made, they're like, hey, can I have some of your corn? And the Little Red Hen likes, fuck you. You didn't make any of it.
You know, I'm familiar with the Ant and the Grasshopper version of that story.
It's similar. But definitely in The Wise Little Hen, the payoff is that the pig and this duck are staring through the window hungrily, and all they're handed is castor oil for their troubles.
The hated punishment of children in 40s cartoons.
And so the duck, though, is given a sailor motif, though mood-wise, he's not exactly what you know about him. He's in a sailor suit and does like the sailor dance that we all know. And So they already were working with a radio voice actor named Clarence Nash. He was doing animal sounds for Disney cartoons previous to 1934. And Walt Disney was thinking of like, hey, what about a duck? And they're like, Clarence, could you do a duck? He does the voice that is the iconic Donald Duck voice. And as the legend goes, Walt Disney says, well, I guess we got our duck. And Clarence Nash would be Donald Duck for the next 50 years. He would voice a character.
It's nuts that we can understand what he says. And it's also nuts that only one other guy can do it, and I hope he's training somebody new.
Yes, yeah. When Clarence Nash passed away and Tony Anselmo took over, I look back on it now and I wish the choice they could have made is have him do Donald 10% less, like be more audible. So then 30 years after that, whoever takes over after him, they turn it down a little more too, because you really, you need to understand Donald. We watched all those DuckTales cartoons. It's like, you just can't be a lead.
Go to Kingdom Hearts 3 and listen to Donald say, this might be a good place to find some ingredients.
Oh, God.
You'll hear that a billion times in this undecipherable Donald Duck voice, and it's irritating.
And if you come to love Donald through reading comic books, then you can't even hear his voice anymore. That's not the voice you hear in your head when you read Donald comics. But yeah, so they invent this character, Donald Duck and Peter Pig. Peter Pig wasn't so popular, but Donald Duck,
Pig.
Instant hit. Animator Dick Lundy is credited for developing Donald's original appearance, which has that longer beak and rubber hose body. And Donald is an instant hit. Just months later, he will appear in the Mickey Mouse hosted black and white short Orphan's Benefit, which is just, it's one of those like variety show cartoons where it's like a character comes on stage, does a bit, and then another character goes on stage.
And I believe, does Donald do Mary Had a Little Lamb or something like that?
This is when Donald becomes Donald.
Okay.
Because, yeah, he's trying to say a poem and he has a lot of trouble and the kids are heckling him.
I feel like that was the radio bit that Clarence Nash did.
Yes.
That whole
yeah.
like reciting the poem kind of thing in that voice.
Yeah. So that they made that Donald's thing. And not only that, but in that one, when he gets pissed, Donald hops up and down with his arms out. Like his second cartoon, they invent the Donald freak out. Like, and that's when they figured out, like, Donald Duck is funny as you push him farther and farther to the edge, and then he freaks out and makes the duck noise, and you're like, yay, the freak. Like, that's the release. That is the excitement of a Donald Duck cartoon.
It's better than the character who goes, oh no.
Exactly. Yeah. Goofy, you can at least be like, uh-oh, Goofy's so stupid, but he's getting in funny situations. Like, that also, I mean, Orphan's Benefit follows this thing of like, well, Mickey's like the host of things, and other characters do the funny stuff. Mickey goes, wasn't that a great cartoon, kids?
He's the Billy Crystal of that world.
So then he's paired with Mickey in a lot of cartoons. If you've seen one of the most famous Mickey color ones, the band concerts, Donald is he's actually driving Mickey crazy in that one, playing Turkey in the Straw. And then they also discover in 35, it's a funny combo. Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, the three of them together in shorts like Service Station and Fire Brigade. And it became very clear that Donald was getting more liked by viewers than all the other characters, especially a boring-ass mouse. So things are moving very quickly in the evolution of Donald. He's getting bigger and bigger parts, cartoon after cartoon. 1936's Moving Day saw the debut of what is basically Donald's classic character design. They tweak it just a little bit afterwards, but if you see him in Moving Day, you're like, yeah, it's pretty much the Donald we know. And by the end of 1936, Donald appeared in what would be his first lead cartoon. It's still called Mickey Mouse Presents, or a Mickey Mouse cartoon, but it's Donald and Pluto, and it's just Donald and Pluto goofing around with like water pipes.
I have no nostalgia for these cartoons because I didn't see them until I was in my 20s, but I love the giant character face that appears.
Yes, yeah.
It's so stylized and so of its era, but it's really in your face.
I do know a few of these because we didn't always have Disney Channel, but I probably 6 months of my life we did have Disney Channel, and they would air a lot of these. Not the one we're talking about today, but like the one where Donald is constantly bedeviled by a robot who's like, your hat, sir, or by a robot. Yeah, a friendly robot.
And we've said this before on podcasts, but yes, these cartoons were behind the Disney Channel paywall for a long time. So I grew up with Warner Brothers. I have no knowledge of these outside of, renting them on DVD or watching them on Disney Plus. And I think that was a big mistake because they were very precious about the classic characters. We talked about it on things like DuckTales, where it was a battle getting Donald on the show at all.
Yeah, I was more of a Looney Tunes boy myself, but I enjoyed Donald cartoons far more than any of the other ones. Like, if it was even the super artistic ones, I was like, well, that's nice, but can't like a guy like smack another guy or get like beat up? Donald would get at least a little more violent than the other ones.
I guess I would only see these as a kid on The Wonderful World of Disney when Michael Eisner would introduce, of course.
Hello.
Exactly. And they'd just be a compilation of, like, here are the Christmas shorts, here are the Halloween shorts, and that's all I would see of these in my childhood.
Or if you'd watch, like, the DTV music videos, you'd see snippets of these cartoons played over, like, the greatest hits of the 1980s. So, 1937, Donald Duck gets his first actual starring role in a Donald Duck cartoon with his big face on it. It is called Don Donald, where he's trying to woo a Mexican duck who is known as Donna, but is virtually Daisy Duck, though Daisy Duck wouldn't appear for a few years. Also, though, when I see the picture of it, it's not the classic theme song because that didn't get invented until 1947.
Right.
Written by the same guy who wrote Der Fuhrer's Face.
I forgot that Donald has a theme song. That's right.
That's who do. Who never ever start an argument. I love that song. But he was appearing in more and more shorts all through 1937. All this happening as Mickey is becoming more of his transition to like this elder statesman, or his cartoons are like, I had a nice dinner date with my gal, like that. And polls are starting to show that this is maybe old wives' tale, but it is like polls were showing that Donald was becoming the most popular Disney character. And I think really it was, his relatable anger, that distinct voice, and also, he's a hard luck working man. Like, that's the character. Many of the best ones are like, Donald has a shitty time at a job. Donald gets a new job, or he's trying to bake a cake, or he wants to go to sleep, and nothing lets him.
Before people were getting Joker-fied, they were getting Donald-fied.
Yes, yeah. People loved him so much, and he was also a hit in, newspaper comic strips are meaningless now. If you had your own newspaper comic strip in 1937, you were bigger than a comic book.
And your great-grandchild probably still draws it now.
Yes, yeah. So they had a silly symphony comic strip that Donald became a star in, and just the beginning of Donald's, success on the printed page. In 1937, they expanded his family in the comic with 3 nephews who usually were a perfect foil to drive Donald crazy. Another thing to make him angry. And by 1938, those characters proved so popular that Huey, Dewey, and Louie got animated into their first cartoon. So he was appearing in more and more cartoons by 1939, including getting a new relative in the little-loved Gus Goose. By 1940, Daisy Duck officially existed, and he'd star in some real classics like Early to Bed, Chef Donald, Old MacDonald Duck, closing out 1941. Like, everything's looking great for Donald Duck. Not so much for the Disney Company. And now it's time for I'm going to try to... Look, if you don't know World War II history, we're going to have to refer to it in Der Fuhrer's Face, so I got to cover something.
We won, right? We won that one.
We won!
Yeah!
Yes.
The one war we won!
The one war we won.
We showed up late to World War I. We cleaned up. It was just like, you guys covered most of it.
Well, and we were still like 5 years late to this war.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is very true. We showed up late to this one as well.
So, Europe, Asia, war is mounting. First, there's Emperor Showa, a.k.a. Hirohito. That's what most Americans know him as. His country invaded Manchuria in 1931. Adolf Hitler, his rise to power is fully solidified in 1933 as he becomes the Chancellor of Germany. And both are beginning their buildup of imperial armies to invade other countries. In 1934, Hitler's Nazi party essentially becomes a full dictatorship. He is Der Fuhrer on August 19th. That is when he's proclaimed. That's where the name comes from. It was an invented title. And then on top of that, as Hitler's Nazi party is growing in power, their hideous oppression and mistreatment of Jewish citizens and other minorities is only growing. And it is being reported on by the world. People knew about it when the Olympics happened in Berlin. People knew what was going on. And, that's why it was celebrated that Jesse Owens had such triumph in front of Hitler and showed him up. But yes, 1937, it's just mounting. Japan has carried out a brutal invasion in China. European figures like Mussolini and Franco are also rising to power. Fascism is on the rise. They are building up armies for invasion. 1938, as things are expanding even more against Jewish people, there's the Night of Broken Glass, Kristallnacht, and mass murder is beginning. Things are looking worse and worse. They invade Czechoslovakia as well. And as all this is happening from Walt Disney in a business sense, he has entered feature animation. 1937 is the release of Snow White, and he releases that overseas as well. He makes big money in Europe. Part of his plan with feature films is that, well, like, these will do huge overseas. As a second world war is mounting, you can't make money off of your movies. Like, nobody's showing movies in theaters as war is mounting or an invasion is coming. In 1938 as well, Walt would do something that he would receive a lot of criticism for even then, and now is a real shame for the company, to put it lightly. He hosted a visiting Leni Riefenstahl.
Yeah, and that's a big smoking gun for Walt Disney, for sure.
Yeah, who, in case you don't know, is the propaganda expert of and historically important filmmaker for the Nazi Germany. She directed Triumph of the Will and created a lot of filmmaking techniques that many people learn from, including Walt Disney. But just because he made movies, but the defense I have seen, and people criticized him then because he was seeing Riefenstahl right after the Night of Broken Glass. Like, people were like, how can you host her here? The defense I have seen from some is that Walt Disney is a stupid hick who just wanted to have someone from the German military or the German government there so he could ask them for the money he was owed for Snow White and other films.
I see.
Like, that is the defense I've heard, but it's still like, come on.
Well, you know, America loved working with Nazis, especially after the war, because of have you heard of Operation Paperclip?
Yes.
It's like, hey, do you know a lot about rockets? Let's forget about what you did with the rockets earlier. Come on over, help us get to the moon. It'll be fun.
Tomorrowland was literally built by one of those paperclip Nazi scientists. But, well, that is something to say. Like, Walt did these things, but so did most American companies. A lot of them worked with Nazis. It took a while. Like, if you've heard the story of why Fanta exists, it's because Coca-Cola didn't want to sell in Nazi Germany, but they did want to sell soda, so they made a Fanta. Like, there's a lot of stories like that one, but this is not what this is about. So there were general rumors about Walt being unwelcoming to Jewish people in his offices, and we've read a couple biographies where he said, yeah, I guess there weren't many Jews working at Disney when I worked there. Stories like that. Rumors also persisted that part of his competition was with the Fleischers brothers in New York was somewhat built on his dislike for them, for their cultural background. Not to mention, in one of the most famous Disney cartoons ever, Three Little Pigs, there is a censored brush salesman character that you're like, yeah, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. So Walt Disney will never know. He's been dead for 60 years now. So you'll never really know what was truly in his heart about that. But I'm sure he didn't love Jews. That's for sure. So, okay. September 39, they invade Poland. Soviets make a non-aggression pact with the Nazis. Britain, France, New Zealand, Australia declare war against Hitler. American leadership claims neutrality against the Nazis, but they are quietly assisting the British forces. 1940, the Nazis invade France, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands. The Battle of Britain begins. Italy, Germany, Japan form what we know as the Axis powers. It's getting bad out there. While America, some people want to join in the fight on Britain's side. Others, scarred by World War I, feel like, no, we're anti-interventionism. We're not going overseas. So 1940 is also when Pinocchio comes out. Way less profitable for Disney because they can't go overseas and war is spreading. Even in America, they're seeing lower ticket prices because people are bummed out that it seems pretty obvious World War II is about to start. For Americans, it has started everywhere else. And Fantasia is a giant bomb. What a weird way to say that. It doesn't do very well. And as things are going bad for Disney, Some people argue that Disney's company was in danger of closing after a 1940 like that. And if they hadn't got a cash infusion at the end of 1941 from propaganda cartoons, there wouldn't be a Walt Disney Company.
That saved so many filmmakers making propaganda.
It's true. It's also, it's like the government can like spend money and help things. It's weird.
They can just invent money and give it to you. It rules.
But 1941, London is being bombed. The oppression and atrocities Nazis are committing in their territories worsen. Mass murders become frequent. Japan's expansion over the Asian continent is getting very tense indeed. Disney's company is shrinking more and more. Then, December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, Pearl Harbor is attacked on the orders of Japan's General Tojo. The next day, the U.S. will officially declare war against Japan. Germany, because they're in a pact with Japan, declares war on the United States. And America has changed forever as they officially enter World War II.
John Voight got out of that wheelchair and signed Declaration of War. I've seen the movie.
Oh, the famous Pearl Harbor film. But something less known in history is that the same day as Pearl Harbor, 500 American troops occupy Disney Studios because it is a nearby space that has open recording sound stages where soldiers can occupy while they wait orders in case they need to go to a nearby military base and go overseas.
What about the Third Amendment, sir?
I know. Disney threw that out. It apparently was the only Hollywood production studio that was actually occupied by the American soldiers. Yeah. And the very next day, December 8th, Walt Disney signs his first of many contracts, this one with the Navy, to produce propaganda films for them. A lot of them instructional, but not all.
I'm sure it's like super out of print and $1 million now, but on that Treasury set of the war cartoons, I will say most of them are boring.
Very boring.
Yeah,
yes,
dry and boring.
No, like Victory for Air Power is just, those were made for an audience of like 3,000 guys.
Yeah.
Like, and mainly just for a few generals. Victory for Air Power was made for a few generals to say, you should build a bunch of airplanes and drop bombs with them because that's how you're going to win this war. But this is a giant cash infusion from government funds. Like, the money they're being paid is far more profit than they made on most of their films. So they are starting to work hard. 1942 is a big time for them. They're not only making cartoons, but also in their instructional live action stuff, they're still doing like, oh, here's an animated, chart, or here's how the inside of an airplane engine works, or whatever. Some of the first animated shorts they did were paid for by the Treasury. Early 1942 saw The New Spirit, which is about Donald Duck paying taxes.
I love that short because it tries to make paying taxes patriotic, and it tells you like taxes for tanks, taxes for planes, taxes to fight the Axis.
Taxes to fight the Axis. It is the hardest sell you ever heard. But there is some comedy to it where Donald is hearing the radio go like, "Then you want to help, don't you? You do anything for America, wouldn't you, to beat our enemies?" Like, yeah. Well, then you got to pay your taxes. And Donald goes, taxes.
It also shows you how complicated it was to write things before ballpoint pens. It's like, first get your inkwell, and then your blotter, of course, and then your ledger, and then your straight edge. It's like all of these things that have been like wiped off the face of the earth because we just have a ballpoint pen or a computer.
I also like seeing Donald, say that he made $2,501 in 1941. And he's like, and of course I have 3 dependents, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. Like, there's something about watching the exactness of a cartoon character filling out his taxes that is funny to me. So he was doing those kind of ones that were a mix of like boring tax stuff plus rah, let's fight our enemies things. By mid-1942, Donald will even join many of his fellow Americans in being drafted into service. And in a cartoon worked on by Carl Barks, Donald gets drafted. It's actually pretty humorously like joking about what it is to be in the Army. It's like Donald marches by a bunch of propaganda like, hey, it's pretty great to be in the Army. And then the second he's in there, like, this sucks.
It makes being in the Army seem awful, which it probably is.
It's like you're lied to by all these posters like, hey, look at all the hot gals you'll get in the Army. And then he's just poked and prodded. I mean, they have a joke that seems to even be like a thing up your butt joke that then they're like, no, a thing didn't really go up Donald's butt when he's being checked out here. But That's what I thought as a little kid. I did see Donald gets drafted, and I thought mainly what you did in the Army was peel potatoes.
Goofy did not pass the physical, unfortunately.
Remember in our childhoods, they did the Ren and Stimpy Join the Army one, which was just a copy of all these types, or a tribute to these enlistment cartoons.
And eventually they were peeling bombs.
God, that was good. Though the Donald cartoons, like, they weren't as rough and intense as some of the Looney Tunes ones would be. Not to mention Private Snafu, which was made directly for the Army. Rewatching those, I'm like, well, these can be a lot gruffer because they're just imagining like it's only enlisted men watching this.
They're a lot funnier, but I mean, they'd have not aged particularly well.
No, I will say too, not to say that the Disney ones don't have very hurtful portrayals of Japanese people. They did it less than the Looney Tunes ones did. Those were a lot harsher to the Japanese, I would say, in my experience of rewatching them. And so Donald is kind of, Mickey and Goofy, they did appear in some like War Bond stuff, but Donald really was the front lines of the military cartoons they were doing. In 1942, part of the propaganda they were paid to do also was Saludos Amigos.
Right.
Which was all about building bridges to South American countries that the American government feared would join fascism. And so why not have Donald Duck hang out with a Brazilian parrot? And it's like, yeah, we're all friends dancing.
And then Three Caballeros.
Yeah, Three Caballeros after that. One of the horniest Donald cartoons.
Oh, boy. He's chasing women all over that beach.
So that's 42. It's 1943. America's fighting wars on two fronts. And we start the year with two Donald shorts. One, The New Spirit of 43, which is a different approach at saying to pay taxes, because there's a lot of Donald cartoons where a good and a bad angel tell him to do something.
Right.
In this case, it's a Scottish duck proto-Scrooge telling him, save your money for taxes, boyo. And then a zoot suit wearing, honestly pretty similar to Gladstone Gander guy going like, nah, spend all the money, it's fun. And then they say, if you waste that money in a bar, it's basically like you're giving that money to Hitler.
He does the little like shapely woman
the
sign with his hands. Like,
yes.
You want to spend that money on dames.
Yeah, and Donald's like, yes, I do. But eventually Donald does the right thing, which is give his money to the Uncle Sam to build bombs. So that's the other one that debuts in January 1943. The other, Der Fuhrer's Face. So, released in the same month also as the very stark and heavy propaganda film Education for Death, about how Hitler's Germany trains people to die in war. This was kind of the other side of the coin, a lighter, sillier, but no less angry and negative towards Hitler cartoon by many of the top people who worked on Donald cartoons in the 40s. And the director of it was Jack Kinney. He was mainly, up to that point, running the Goofy instructional shorts. He didn't really work on a lot of Donald shorts as a director, but he was given the director's chair for what was then, in late 1942, known as Donald Duck in Nutsy Land, which is why they say Nutsy Land in the cartoon. Mm-hmm. And it was going to be written by a pair of people who worked on Dumbo right before this, Joe Grant and Dick Humer. So as one of the writers would say, I didn't see which writer, but this is credited as the writer saying this in an interview, quote, "We feel that a public character such as Donald Duck, writhing rebelliously in the clutches of the Nazis, will bring the situation home to every man, woman, and child in this country. For Donald Duck belongs to them like a member of their own family. They will end up hating Hitler 20 times more than if they had gone through the same ordeal with some curly-haired hero who is, after all, merely another movie actor." So that is them saying this propaganda works way better if it's your favorite buddy Donald Duck suffering through a version of Nazi Germany than if it's just like, Clark Gable or whatever. Dedicated Disney songwriter Oliver Wallace, who would later write the Donald theme, penned a tune for it, Der Fuhrer's Face, and ahead of its release, the song is performed by a comedy musician, super popular radio star Spike Jones and his band.
And that's the version of the song that I know best because when I was like 11 or 12, I bought the Dr. Demento, I think 20th anniversary 2 cassette tape set, and that was on it. So imagine 1993, 11-year-old Bob Mackey walking around listening to Fuehrer's Face. And I remember asking, we had like a nice neighbor of ours who was a World War II vet. And after listening to the song, I asked him about it. He said he did like it when he was in the service.
The service.
So
nice.
Yeah, it was a popular song back then.
I hope that guy had like an old ancient tattoo of like the
He
flag.
did.
Oh, that's great.
He had a big smeary tattoo on his wrinkled arm of like a battleship or something.
That's how I knew somebody was a vet. It was this old white guy who like, an illegible tattoo is visible on their arm. They saw some shit. But yeah, the song was released months before the film came out, and it became a big old hit. Like it sold over 1 million copies of that record. Its sheet music was a huge hit, and it is a different enough version from the one in the cartoon is more genteel.
Yeah,
I'd say.
the Spike Jones version is about farting in Hitler's face.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's a razz. It's a Bronx cheer.
I think they want to fart in his face.
It's about farting in his face. Yes, that is the giggle everyone's thinking. Like when you heil in his face, you're farting in it.
I think they're selling it as a raspberry, but they really want to put their butts right in his face.
You had to win. You know, they got the Hays Code still. They can only say so much.
They can't even say hell in this cartoon.
I know, yeah. But they can still have both cartoon and the Jones version have an effeminate Nazi joke. They do, which like. We had a war to win. They're like, yeah, what do you hate about people? They could also be gay. So like, don't you hate Nazis even more now? But I can also see that the cartoon and the song, part of the mockery is that, you know, Hitler builds up the Nazi Superman in his army to be this, you know, and you should be right to be fucking scared to have to fight in a war against the Nazi army. It seems pretty goddamn scary. They took over Paris. They did all this shit. And so I can see the usefulness of propaganda that says, actually, they're a bunch of like wusses and screw them. We hope we think they all suck. Like that, I think, is the purpose of it ultimately. So there's an unforgettable poster of just Donald throwing a tomato right in Hitler's face. I love the look on Donald's face of like, yeah, like, so when there's a joke at the end of the movie about a tomato being thrown in his face, when you see the poster, you're like, oh, that's Donald.
I got to buy that poster now. And yeah, swastikas all over this.
Yes. Yeah. It's, I mean, the imagery is just harsh to see, but it's part of the cartoon, I think, is of like, oh, isn't it shocking to see Donald in this way? Doesn't it make you feel weird and uncomfortable? Like that is the point of it. So by that time next year, the cartoon was a giant hit. People loved it. The song continued on too. They changed the name of the movie to Der Fuhrer's Face because the song was such a hit ahead of time. It won an Oscar in 1944, and it, I think, pretty much solidified Donald as the lead short star of the company.
I forgot it just starts by playing the song. This is the Der Fuhrer's Face anime music video.
Yes.
Because it's like, you people love the song. Well, here's the song. We're going to start with that. We'll get to Donald later. Here's a minute of the song.
Here's the title on screen. Just go straight to it. Yeah, it's also why I'm not going to be really playing many clips for you guys because it's either the song or saying Heil Hitler over and over and over again in the cartoon for funny effect. But I think, not so fun to listen to.
No.
I'm just going to say.
Everything says Heil Hitler in this short. The alarm clock, the rooster, the work whistle, everything.
I mean, it was a fascist dictatorship they were mocking. So, yeah, it's so the propaganda continued past the war's end. Donald would appear in more too. Donald's the only of the Disney stars to appear in one where he actually like kills Japanese soldiers. He does it not with a gun, but by like he accidentally floods their thing. But there were multiple ones of like Daffy Duck or Bugs Bunny or whatever fights foreign armies, but Donald only did that in one, Commando Duck. But yeah, the propaganda would continue after the war was over. They still worked a lot with the American government, including on the ones to be like, hey, capitalism's actually good, guys. That's and I will say, I can't believe I never thought of this before, but I found one historian who theorizes something very convincing to me, which is the Disney company, before they became a propaganda machine, was good at making cartoons, but wasn't really great at advertising themselves. After a decade of making a propaganda, that's when you like look at how Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Disney propagandizes Disneyism.
Okay.
Like all the skills and tools they learned making propaganda are implemented in everything they did afterwards. If you see all the ads for Disneyland that aired on ABC in 1955, you're like, you can see the A to B line is right there from all the propaganda tools they learned in the 40s.
One of the DVD sets from that era we were talking about was just Disneyland propaganda.
Yes,
from when it opened.
That one you will see on Disney Plus. What you won't see on Disney Plus are any of this World War II stuff. The short and most of the other World War II content, though I did see like the draft ones growing up as a kid, so it's not like they were all entirely tamped down. But after the Allies won, as a propaganda tool, it's not really very useful anymore. And also the imagery of a swastika wearing Donald Duck became more and more potently negative, and out of context, it became just a thing that Disney's like, no, this goes in the vault. No public screenings of it. We're not going to put it on TV, though sometimes I read stories of people saying, I watched the Mickey Mouse Club in the 50s and they showed Der Fuhrer's face on it. But eventually, I'd say by the 60s, I think Der Fuhrer's face went into the Disney vault and was shown less and less. If you're a cartoon historian, you were aware of it and thought, Leonard Maltin would have told you, or Jerry Beck would have said, one of the best cartoons ever made. So good. The height of Disney at their powers. So funny in Donald Duck. But for many, many years, it was either not shown anywhere, or it was shown if you knew an animation historian who's like, I have a reel of it. I'm going to set it up and we're going to play it. Like, by the 1980s, when Disney got their own channel and a VHS division to distribute these films, most of the war shorts were further mothballed. Der Fuhrer's Face never got a physical release for years and years and years, and Disney seemed like it would be even less likely that they would ever do it. For example, as our friend Thad Komorowski alerted me to, in 1994, Jerry Beck, animation historian, did a book of the 50 greatest cartoons of all time, like ranking all of them with a ton of notes in history. At number 22 is Der Fuhrer's Face, but Disney forbid them from using any images from it. And he could use public domain cover art for the music notes, but he had to crop out Donald Duck from it because it was just going to be a big legal headache if they did it. So that's how much in the 90s Disney was like, this cartoon does not exist. We do not talk about it. And then in quite a coup for animation historians, in 2004, Disney did the unthinkable with their very limited, really for just collectors and pricey, treasure collections, which they had done the chronological Donald. And I feel like I remember seeing on the internet people saying, if they're going to really do this chronologically, they're going to reach Der Fuhrer's Face. And do they not include it? Is this actually a completionist set? And they did it in the 2004 release. It's on there, as are other cartoons that had not been seen ever on official physical media.
I was so excited to watch that war cartoon set because it was the forbidden fruit. And you know what? At the end of the day, they're all right.
Yeah.
Like, I think Der Fuhrer's Face has amazing animation as a cartoon. I don't think it's, like, amazing. I think it's a good cartoon, but not one of the best cartoons of all time.
No. I wouldn't call... I can think of 5 Donalds I like more than this one, but it is incredibly, like, historically important, and there are lengthy Leonard Maltin introductions explaining, like, guys, like, basically the version of what I've just done for the last 50 minutes here.
You're bad and you should feel bad.
Yeah.
Please don't watch this.
But I definitely think Leonard Maltin's job there, too, is to say what he needs to say, which is, this is not for kids. Kids shouldn't see this. You need the proper context. This is not... And I would still say that to this day. Like, no kid should watch Der Fuhrer's Face. Like, someone under, like, even 14, I don't think has the right knowledge of history to really understand it.
But at the same time, when I was a kid and when we were kids, Henry, they would always show the war cartoons, Looney Tunes. Some of them. Like, I didn't know if the little man from the draft board was going to show up to my house and draft our family.
That's a good, yes, yeah. No, I saw the one of Daffy fighting a Nazi eagle guy. and they all
They showed that one a
explode.
lot. Yeah.
I saw that one so much. Or like it really confused me when Superbugs ends with him going like, I'm going to be a real hero. And he turns into an army guy.
Or the one with the gremlin and the plane is plummeting to the ground, but it stops because they ran out of gas stamps.
You know how it is with these F-Cods. Yeah, all of those. Like, and in the 90s, we saw it in the Simpsons cartoons, The Simpsons series did multiple references to like, here's an Itchy and Scratchy cartoon where they're kicking the butt of Hitler.
That's
like,
so well animated.
Yeah, it's some of the best they ever did. And of course we all know the behind the scenes story of them trying to do one where Bart fights the Nazis.
Right. Nazis on tap.
Nazis on tap. A direct parody of Der Fuhrer's face as well, like, and all the other ones then. But they did put that out on DVD, and I don't know this, but part of me thinks that the Disney as a corporation regrets that because it makes it have a high-quality version that's just out on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
That rumor suggests Disney is terrified to even take off YouTube because then it's a content claim of like, Disney has a Nazi Donald Duck cartoon. They say it's theirs. Like, and so instead it's right there on YouTube. But it's definitely not on Disney Plus. If you dig through the shorts that are on there are a lot of shorts on there, but I don't think any of the World War II related ones are in there. They did make other shorts in the 40s in wartime that were not about the war and were not propaganda, but the ones that were aren't on there. You can see like Saludos Amigos that's on there because while propaganda, it doesn't show Nazis and it's not directly about that.
It's one of the official feature films.
Yes, it's right in the count. Yeah. So sadly, the film mainly exists now out of context. We talked about it before, but it's just internet edgelord content now, including like the images were used some by people who ironically were like, isn't this a crazy shock image to see? But it's also used by some of the most hateful people on the internet to further a hatred that the filmmakers attacked from the very first frame of animation. But that's what happens when context is gone in the world of memes. Like if it's just a picture of Donald Duck reading Mein Kampf, the moment of the cartoon is meaningless in how it's used in some hate speech website.
I think everyone who was a young adult or maybe a teen in the early 2000s, we all hopefully outgrew ironic shock humor.
Yeah.
I'm sure like I would have found Donald as Hitler very funny at like age 20. Like, oh my God, can you believe it? But now it's just like, ooh, this has different weight now that I know a lot more about the world.
I mean, at that very same time the DVD came out, the Treasury Collection, that's also when like Family Guy couldn't go one episode without a Hitler joke, like predominantly written by Jewish writers. But that just shows you the kind of different time. Also, in the early aughts, Nazism seemed like a settled matter. So it was kind of like, we're laughing about a thing that doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't feel that way in the year 2021. So that's why the film needs a boatload of context to be talked about. And so when we come back, we're going to actually just go through the film shot by shot. We'll play some clips. I'll play the Der Fuhrer's face on the other side of the break. Well, why don't we just hear that classic 1947 Donald Duck theme song to take us out?
Who's got the sweetest disposition? One guess who? Who never starts an argument? Who never shows a bit of temperament? Who's never wrong but always right? Who never dream of starting a fight? Who gets stuck with all the bad luck? No one but Donald Duck.
In war, it's typical, sometimes even useful, to demonize your enemy. We still see this today whenever a dictator or despot comes to power anywhere in the world. Caricatures and jokes, not always in the best of taste, rise to the forefront because it's our way of relieving aggression. So it was in World War II. Some people feared Adolf Hitler. Others mocked him. The Disney staff came up with the idea for a cartoon to be titled Donald Duck in Nazi Land, giving the all-American duck a nightmare that he was living in a country run by Nazis. The title changed when a song written for the cartoon by Oliver Wallace became a runaway hit and a now classic recording by Spike Jones. It then became essential to change the name of the cartoon to Der Fuhrer's Face. It's easy to see why the film was so popular. It's very, very funny, reducing the serious tenets of Hitler's Nazism to slapstick absurdities. And it gave audiences a chance to think, as Donald does, about the freedoms they might have taken for granted.
Am I glad to be a citizen of the United States of America?
Der Fuhrer's Face, directed by Jack Kinney, won the Academy Award as Best Animated Short Subject of 1943.
Hey, welcome to The Break. It's Henry Gilbert, and I love living in the United States of America. That's the only quote I'm going to say from this cartoon, though I don't believe in it.
Hey everybody, it's Bob Mackey. I just got done kissing my little Statue of Liberty doll I keep next to me all the time.
And a big thank you to Loki this week for picking this episode. Big piece of animation history. Not on the lightest of topics, World War II and all that, and fascism, but definitely a big one in animation history, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And you know, we can only do this thanks to top-level patrons like Loki at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
That's right. If you go to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons, sign up at the $5 level, you get all these episodes 1 week ahead of time and ad-free, and also access to everything behind the $5 paywall we've been doing for nearly 4 entire years of the Patreon. That includes all of our limited miniseries, over 100 bonus episodes. The most recent one is Talking of the Hill, Season 2, Part 1. That is 11 new episodes of our Talking of the Hill retrospective series on King of the Hill, and that is alongside other things we've done in the past, like Talking Critic, Talking Mission Hill, and Talking Futurama. And we also have a $10 level. When you sign up for that, you get all the $5 stuff, of course, but also access to one mega-long podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
Bob is talking about the What a Cartoon Movie podcast. Now, each month you get to hear the free preview of it, but if you want to hear the entire thing, you need to sign up at the $10 level to get all that, plus the $5 things Bob was just talking about. Each month we cover an animated feature film as in-depth as we go into these cartoons here, which often means we go for over 4 hours about films like Cool World, the 20th anniversary of Shrek, and coming this month, if you like this Disney talk here, we're talking about the 1997 Disney film Hercules, which also features a fascist, James Woods. But you can hear the whole thing if you sign up at the $10 level at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. There's an over 130 hours of material there that you'll get to listen to, ranging as far-reaching as a Goofy movie to Akira to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and so many more. If you like all this duck talk, I bet you'd like our one about DuckTales, the movie. Listen to all of those at the $10 level to get it all at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
And if you never signed up for Patreon before, it's so easy to do. And once you sign up, you're given access to a code. You just drop that into whatever you use to listen to podcasts, and you can download all of our bonus podcasts alongside your free podcast as part of your podcasting lifestyle. And there is also an app Patreon has for any smart device. You can download that and also get our bonus episodes that way. But either way you do it, it is so easy to access everything waiting for you behind the paywall at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
Okay, so now let's head back to the front lines with a classic Donald Duck cartoon.
When the Fuehrer says, "Wie ist the master race?" The Heil, Heil, right in the Fuhrer's face. Not to love the Fuhrer is a great disgrace. So the Heil, Heil, right in the Fuhrer's face. When Herr Goebbels says, "We own the world in space," the Heil, Heil, right in Herr Goebbels' face. Then Herr Göring says, "They'll never bomb this place." The Heil, Heil, right in Herr Göring's face. Is we not the Superman? Arian Führer Superman?
Ja, wie is the Superman?
Super duper Superman. Is this Nazi land so good? Would you leave it if you could? Ja, this Nazi land is good. We would leave it if we could. We bring the world new order.
Eure Hitler's world new order.
Everyone a foreign race will love the Fuhrer's face when we bring to the world disorder. Then the Fuhrer says, "We never will be slaves." The Heil, Heil, but still we work like slaves, while the Fuhrer brags and lies and rants and raves. The Heil, Heil, and work into our grave.
Okay, we are back, and you just heard the film version of Der Fuhrer's Face. We start first with the Donald face on the blue background, which I do love that. But first frame of the cartoon, humorous goose stepping of the 5-piece band hopping around.
And I do like the character designs. Again, it's a problem when you're making fun of, Nazis. It's like, well, these characters are all fun goofballs who are I want to see dance around on the screen. And it's making fun of the idea of like the perfect Aryan Superman because they're all very different looking in ridiculous ways. Like one guy's really tall and lanky, one guy's butt sticks out all the way, one guy's chest sticks out all the way. I say good on them for finding like 5 very different character designs for all these characters.
No, it's some classic Disney silly character designs, and I mean, and also the humorous goose stepping is meant to disarm the very imposing look of the actual Nazi army marching. It's like, no, it's silly. Look at their little like kicks, like. I mean, there's also definitely an effeminacy they are mocking there, too.
Yeah, everything is very silly, and there are swastikas everywhere. Although, the swastikas, I thought they had to be rotated like 45 degrees. They're like 90-degree square swastikas.
Yeah, they're more of a boxy swastika.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, I don't want to know how to correctly display
Trademark
one.
dispute. They didn't want to get sued by the swastika people.
And also another thing they make it more genteel is, yes, it is a tuba that goes on the Heil, which is, doesn't not sound like a fart, but it's not just a total sound. And yes, the band is composed by Axis power leaders. We got Joseph Goebbels on trombone, Heinrich Himmler on the snare drum, Hideki Tojo on the sousaphone, Hermann Goering on the piccolo, and Benito Mussolini on the bass drum. That's who each of them are, and their jokes, I mean, I did chuckle a little hearing. Seeing Mussolini go, "We wouldn't leave him if we could."
Hey, you know what? I've seen the meme with Prince. It's okay to make fun of Italians. It's not racist.
But what is not okay is right after he says that, like, the way Tojo is drawn is not so great for portraying Japanese people.
These Americans living in the glass houses. We're making fun of Nazis for believing they're, Supermen, and then we draw a Japanese person to be like a monster.
Yes, yeah. And, I mean, also, America's government is running a lot of concentration camps of their own for the Japanese Americans who did nothing and were not spies. But yeah, I got to give it to the background designers. The swastika clouds, trees, telephone poles, the houses that are Hitler's face, like that's just such a great design. Because it's just one window in the center, and the window is slightly, or the window cover is slightly up, giving the impression of Hitler's mustache in the center of this like pink house.
One thing about Hitler, good character design.
Yes, yeah, no, that's part of the dictatorship, is building up like a specific image and look. Like it's hardly an accident, but that also makes it easier to mock. And I definitely think you can hear in these voices here, Pinto Colvig and Billy Belcher, two of the top voice actors for the Disney studios at the time. Pinto, most known as Goofy, and Belcher, he was the original Pete. Like his like angry guy voice, like, "What's that?" Like in Donald Gets Drafted, just him yelling at Donald is just so funny.
Now, I will say, I will talk about what this short is about, but the problems they have with Nazi Germany, I feel these are the problems with America after the war, where it's like, you better salute the fucking flag. You better say the Pledge of Allegiance. And also, as soon as the war is over, we begin the dismantling of unions, very shortly after this, where, I mean, socialism was on the rise before the war. Then that was all dropped to go fight in war. When we came back, it's like, well, fuck socialism. We're going to clean up with capitalism. The number one superpower of the universe.
The argument that you have to wake up early and work really hard and have to salute the flag all the time, like that, how different is that from 50s America?
Yeah.
Just that, you're so right, man. I mean, like when Donald wakes up in reality at the end, not to get ahead of it, but like that also is a very silly, like, oh, every part of your room is the red, white, and blue. Like that, just as the opposite version of having the red with swastika wallpaper all over his place.
Donald desecrated the flag to make drapes. It's very sad.
It's even more effeminate, the line in the Spike Jonze version, but as far as detailed sissy animation, seeing, I believe it's Himmler doing it, his movement on Super Duper, his sassy movement on Super Duper Superman, it is a technical achievement.
It is.
It feels weird to compliment it in certain ways, but I just want to say, if you told someone, draw a sissy acting, that's good sissy animation.
It's very dainty piccolo playing, too.
Yes, yeah. I wonder what they're saying about this guy. I wonder. I mean, also, I love, again, great animation of like when Goebbels is pointing his finger into the tuba going like, "Would you leave it if you could?" No, he would, like, and then they all pop out of it. Like, funny bit. And I also like the clever word play of when we bring the world disorder. Get it? They're saying it in an accent of this as disorder, but they actually mean they're going to disorder the world, which when you look at what the Nazis were actually doing in 1943, disorder is hardly the worst thing you'd say what they did, but
they're just so disorganized.
I know it's but that's just them trying to be. Sadly, they were incredibly organized with what they did.
Mm-hmm. That was the problem.
Yeah, but anyway, so the animators were tasked with putting the Nazi salute in as many comical places as possible, and goddamn, they pulled it off. They're like, well, it's an alarm clock. No, the alarm clock does the salute. The cuckoo bird coming out of the clock does the salute, and it's Hitler's face. Like, it's so many. It's overwhelming, the amount of it, which is the point, but Jesus.
I think, like, they realize some things are going to be too shocking for the audience, it feels like. So when Donald gets out of bed, he hails Hitler, Hirohito, and Mussolini, but we only see the shadow of him. I think, like, actually seeing Donald do that to the three Axis powers would be just too, like, frightening and alienating.
I wonder too if they were thinking, if this is satire, maybe they were even thinking about what it looks like out of context. Were they telling themselves, like, if we actually show on screen Donald, not in silhouette, but on screen, saluting the three leaders of the Axis powers, I mean, is that just going to be shown in, the bases in Germany, Italy, and Japan of like, see, Donald actually worships us? Like, maybe they were thinking of that with that. I don't know. It also, like, just seeing it in silhouette makes it even more affecting. You are like, you just feel everything's wrong. Like, and that is, I think, the desired effect. You're like, everything's wrong here. This is horrid to see Donald doing this. But also I like that Donald is like, yeah, I did it. Back to bed. And they're like, no, splash him in the face.
I don't like to see Donald like jauntily walking to eat breakfast in his Nazi uniform going, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah, they at least when he puts on his uniform, it's more subtle, but they're like, this is cheap fabric. It itches to wear. Like, you see the way he pops it on. And also, like, the way they just stab him in the butt and make him do it. And he's already, like, grumpily mumbling. Like, though this is pretty much the pattern of other Donald cartoons that preceded it, of like the Donald is having a nice time sleeping and some jerk makes him do something like a bee or a chipmunk, and he's like, right afraid, I gotta wake up. But this time it is the bayonet of a Nazi. And yeah, he salutes them. He then gets to his breakfast, which you already see that Donald is a sneaky guy. He has his secret safe full of coffee.
Covetously grabbing the coffee container, and there's one single bean in there.
They just dips right into it. And then when I see atomizers, those old kind of perfume things, I only think of old cartoons because that's the only place I ever saw them. My mommy had different perfume things then, but I just think of like jokes of cartoon character goes to the counter and gets the thing sprayed in their face. But here it's the flavor of the taste of bacon and eggs, which, when I'm on a diet, I think of eating that too. I'm just like, can I just have the taste? Just give me the taste of it. But the point is, it sucks to be in Nazi Germany. You're going to have to ration everything, and you got to eat literal wood bread, and it tastes awful.
And you got to read Mein Kampf.
Forced to at gunpoint. But when you see it just is one single frame, shocking. Like, that's now I love the sawing of the bread animation is such good stuff.
He's got his like foot up on it.
Oh god, yeah, he has to stable it, and then the way he like rips, like you can see just how tough it is, and it's just a chunk in his throat. And even though he's clearly hungry, the second he takes one bite, he's like, I'm not hungry anymore. God, it's so, every bit of Donald's face is just amazing. Like, they've already perfected the wild take of Donald Duck by 1943. And also just his pissed off sounds that Nash is doing as he's just so angry, everything. And then when he gets caught mentioning, he's like, no, Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler. And then also the next time you see him goose stepping, I think it's important that they show that he is being like, has a gun pointed at his back.
Yeah, and he's also being like kicked in the ass.
Yes, yeah. I also really like the visual of the opening army marches into his home, and then he's forced to carry the drum now as all the other leaders are still marching with him, and he's just like mumbling to himself then too.
And then you know what else Nazi Germany does? They pollute.
They pollute.
Unlike America.
Yes. For some reason, the factories don't produce smoke in America. America. In Nazi Germany, definitely do.
I don't think there'd be an EPA for like 30 years in America.
No, I think you're right. But when they introduce you to Naziland, the original title of it, and the red into the black coloring, that is seen across most of Disney's propaganda cartoons. Like when they were going to draw scary Germany, that's the background painting style they would use. So even in this comedic one, it is just red and black, just death staring you in the face. Though this also follows the pattern of so many Donald cartoons before it. An unseen voice is torturing him and making him do stuff and driving him crazy.
It's very Kafkaesque.
It is. Oh, man, that's so Kafkaesque, Bob. That's... And yeah, the color palette is just so simple that I think it really works for Donald. You're put in a real mood watching Donald get tortured here, and we hear in the song like, but still we work like slaves. Like the work never ends in Naziland.
And then the rest of the cartoon is this shell assembling gags, which I wish there were more gags in this cartoon, but it's some of the most well animated short material I've ever seen in my life, and I recommend it's on YouTube. Watch it because we can't do it justice. Just the sheer amount of gags they get out of him assembling different sizes of shells, how they hit him, how they like move through his uniform. It's very well done.
Just the focus he has on it, like, and how you have to spin it really fast, like, and just up and down. He has to get smaller ones, and then the way he is like they're almost finial sized or like thimble sized. He's like having to do it with like just 2 fingers, but 2 at a time because it's moving so fast.
While also highlighting all of the portraits of Hitler.
I mean, adds a joke of that he's having to do that, and then he has to raise his arm, and then raise arm, screw, and then just how fast he has to go, and just once it's over, he's like, God, it's so good, the just amazing animation, and also like even the steam whistle does the salute, wears a helmet and the armband. Like this is Disney's comedy team at their height. Like they're just finding funny, clever ways to incorporate that into every part of the world. And yes, that's also when we get to the use of the word hell, which is just a crash on screen. That's the most obvious, like, no, this is about how we wish Hitler was dead. Like,
yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if one of those shells blew him straight to hell? And wouldn't that be swell? But you can't say hell in these.
Not with the Hays Code. No, we're at war, but we can't say hell.
Snafu cartoons could say hell.
Mm-hmm.
They could say, the funniest thing at the start of a Snafu cartoon is like, situation all up. Like,
reference to the F word.
Yes. And yeah, the constant salutes, even when he's knocked off, he has to then salute with his ass to Hitler with his, I love Donald seat and tail acting.
Oh, his seat, his big seat.
To steal a line from our friends at Podcast The Ride, talking about Donald's seat. But he has quite a seat, that Donald Duck.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's really why everybody loves him. He has a much bigger butt than Mickey Mouse or Goofy.
He's appealing to the human eye with his thick rump.
One of my favorite bits as a kid was, I think it's the Jack and the Beanstalk one they do, where Donald's butt looks like a, garlic piece or a little onion, and his butt is, he has to avoid being like stabbed by the fork. I like that bit.
You can't write jokes like that about Mickey's butt or Goofy's butt.
Yeah. Or remember the great bit of Donald when he's upside down in the barber chair and his butt is being styled by the automatic robot
That's right.
hair cutter? I
Sickos.
believe that was a Carl Barks bit, I think. Carl Barks, before he became the comic book artist of Disney, he was a story guy on the Disney cartoons. And also, like, he was a pacifist. I think he didn't want America to enter into World War II. I think he changed his mind, but for a time, he was one of the anti-interventionalists as a pacifist. But anyway, so yes, there's all this, like, worshipfulness of Donald and also the hard work. And it is, could the animators be channeling some of the feelings they were feeling about overwork at the time?
The drawing Donald working very hard also seems like a lot of work.
Yes, yeah. It makes you wonder, but you never know.
And I don't know what the production schedule on these cartoons was like, but so much in the world could have changed in the months they were working on this. It's just, what a weird time to make a cartoon about war.
Yeah. They think you make it Naziland instead of like, maybe we've invaded Poland by this point. Maybe we've liberated France. Like, you never know. Like, don't make this a joke about France or whatever. Like, make it more vague. Same with, where are we in, have we gotten to the Philippines yet? What islands are we in the Pacific Theater? You can't know. And also, it's like, it's versus what the public knows versus what we knew. Like, we can read in a history book, like, on this day, this battle happened.
Exactly, yeah.
But when does someone in Hollywood, California in 1943 know that? And I think my favorite animation of him putting together the shells is when there's the giant pile of them. So not only does he have to screw on the top, but he also has to like sort them into order. And he doesn't have 1 second to rest. And then, but then he does get a few seconds to rest. It's vacation time to see the Alps. Even then, though, you don't get to rest. It's time to do swastika-style calisthenics, which are very silly drawings that also are upsetting to see out of context, for sure.
America, famous for its vacation days. All workers take vacations in America.
Yeah, it's like, well, wait, like the weekend was a relatively new thing in America in 1943.
That socialists died for.
And Walt Disney complained about every second, like, yeah, these guys are going to want the weekend now all of a sudden. But yes, after he does all his calisthenics to stay healthy for the Fuehrer, that is when he learns, by special decree of the Fuehrer, you have been chosen to work overtime. And
this is the animators working overtime, especially when Donald splits into 2 Donalds to work on all the bombs.
Like, I read that as his soul left his body.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, and it's the shock. He's like, oh my God, my soul's out of my body. Get back in, get back in. And as all Donald cartoons must, the release comes at the end where Donald simply cannot take it anymore. He stands no more.
He's cracking up.
I would say, yeah. His freak out is so good. My favorite is when he opens his mouth and he has his tongue sticking out and he's rubbing his hands down his tongue like, blah, blah, blah. They knew how to perfectly do Donald. Forget it. If you can see an extra line around the iris of Donald, that's how you know he's gone crazy.
It's not even like angry Donald. It's just like a complete freak out. And then his hallucination is amazing. It's real like, I mean, Disney did these like hallucinatory sequences a lot in this time period. Dumbo and Dumbo.
Well, there's a couple images from this that they just fully adapted from the Pink Elephants section in Dumbo, but other things are original. Like, these were the moments where their animators really got to like get out there with designs, and here it's just shells everywhere. The bird cage atop the shell is such a great like image. The nesting dolls of shells jumping inside each other's mouths, another like clever shot. And then comes probably the image that Disney I think regrets the most, I would bet, which is, for how much I saw it on the internet, you wouldn't think that it's like 10 frames like it is in the show, the movie. But
I assume meant to be genuinely shocking to the audience. Like, yes, Donald Duck is Hitler. That's what he's fearing the most.
Instead of it being the human Hitler that's drawn this entire time, it is a Donald Duck as Hitler in the pose. It is terrifying to see. And then the photograph of it is then saluting a bomb that also looks like Hitler and has the arm up. And I mean, it is a shocking vision. It's meant to be the topper vision of a scary section, and it's meant to make you like, it's to push you over the edge to be like, this is pretty fucked up, right? Don't you love America? Like that. That's the 1-2 punch of it. But these very limited frames, which no one knew. Well, I guess a computer did exist in 1943, but no one thought this would be shared all over the world in pictures on screens like when they were drawing this.
And the 2 big bombs grow even bigger, and they smash Donald into 1 million Donalds. Well, more like 20 Donalds. And then when they cut back to him in bed, his ass is just hanging out of his pants, and all the little Donalds are floating into his butt.
That's such a funny drawing. I love that. And also the suggestiveness of what him being squeezed between 2 things till he explodes. And also I love the as a fantastic shot of the reverse imagery of a giant shell pounding on the heads of Donalds moving through a Donald production line. But yeah, back then, a technique Disney loved was underexposed animation, like a ghostly image. And if a soul left the body, or if a soul was coming back to a body, like, how does Alice in Wonderland wake up at the end of her movie? Like, well, a ghostly image of herself meets back up with her body, and then she wakes up. Like, which also Oliver Wallace wrote a lot of the songs for the Alice in Wonderland film and Peter Pan. Like, you can feel the similarities of the songwriter in those cases. But yeah, they really loved an underexposed image, and in a way it was them showing off, their technical capacity. Like, hey, not everybody else can do this. This is because of like our technical achievement at the Walt Disney Studios in Burbank. But yes, just so you know, finally, one last dose of propaganda. the film would work fine if Donald woke up in what is his normal home and he's like, oh my God, am I glad I'm not in Nazi Germany? But when it's really propaganda, it's when every inch of his place is red, white, and blue, the stars and stripes, and then a golden Statue of Liberty. Like, the regular Statue of Liberty, not good enough. It needs to be glistening gold.
And in his window.
Yes, that he hugs every single morning.
And kisses in a suggestive place.
Oh, yeah. Yes, you're right. They were getting away with something there. Now, what I think would have been a great final joke in a non-propaganda cartoon would be Donald, after waking up, going like, oh, I'm late for work. My boss is going to fire me.
It's also weird because it's like, do you know how Nazis have this weird symbol everywhere and they salute all the time? Well, I'm going to kiss my Statue of Liberty, a normal thing.
Yes, yeah. It's and that also that he thinks that the Statue of Liberty is doing the Nazi salute, like that is disturbing to me in its own way too. It's but Donald makes it clear, boy, like we get it. We already get this. He doesn't need to say, boy, am I glad I'm a citizen of the United States.
And he shows us his birth certificate on the screen. That was distracting.
And just his satisfied, like, oh, like that's so, but that's why I'm glad they then give what I'm assuming. Again, you have to think of yourself. You're in a movie theater in 1943, surrounded by other people after watching this. When it's Hitler's face on screen, you're all supposed to boo. You're supposed to be going, boo, boo, Hitler. Hiss. And then since they know you're doing that, the animators can assume that's happening. That's why a tomato gets thrown at Hitler, because they're like, you don't got to throw the tomato yourselves. We
shouldn't have shown this on Tomato Night. The screen is ruined.
So yes, the comical drawing of Hitler gets a tomato right in the face, and then that red turns into the end as we get a reprise of the song, which also tells you like, boy, I ought to go home and buy that LP on my way back. Also, it's blackout night, so I better just turn on that light. As
Spike Jones is too noisy to listen to during the war. They're gonna find you. They're gonna bomb you.
That's right. God, but. I mean, as a short film, it is, it is one of the greats. Like it's Disney animators for Donald doing some of the best work they ever did. Just tons of funny jokes, but it's not the best Donald cartoon. I like Chef Donald where he makes the cake, or I also love anyone's of I forget the name of it, but when the one that ends with the nephews making Donald think he is dead so they can eat his dinner. That's a pretty great one. There's tons of great ones.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is a curiosity that a lot of people worked very hard on. It's interesting with the historical context, of course, but you're not going to sit down with your family and be like, okay, let's watch Donald be a Nazi for 9 minutes. Let's go. It's time.
You're pretty exhausted by the end of it.
Yeah.
And again, as global fascism is on the rise, it's certainly not any funnier now in 2021.
And we're not as naive to think, the problem with fascism is people just work too hard.
Yeah. That is not what we need to hear personally. Maybe in Disney thought in 1943, what average Joes needed to hear was it would be really hard to live in Nazi Germany because you'd have to work really hard. Because, I mean, that definitely speaks to an assumed white Christian audience. Like, obviously, if I lived in Nazi Germany, I wouldn't be working at a factory.
Yeah.
That's what their nightmares would be. But yes, so that is it. Der Fuhrer's face. I'm glad we covered it for historical purposes as well on this podcast. And, thanks for going through it with us as well. And if you've never seen it before, if you do care about animation history for your own knowledge, like it is worth seeing, I would say. And fortunately, it's just on YouTube. You don't have to buy that Treasury DVD set. You can just watch it there. Probably never going to be on Disney+.
So thanks again to Loki for being a great patron. If you want to be a patron too, head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons and sign up at the $5 level. When you do, you get all these episodes 1 week ahead of time and ad-free, and also access to everything behind the $5 paywall. That includes all of our limited miniseries. The most recent one was Talk King of the Hill Season 2 Part 1. That was 11 new episodes of Talk King of the Hill, our King of the Hill retrospective, and there will be a new miniseries coming up in the fall of 2021 for people behind the $5 paywall. And we also have a $10 level. When you sign up for that, you get all the $5 stuff, of course, and also access to one mega-long podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
Bob is talking about our What a Cartoon movie podcast, where we cover animated feature films in as dense a detail as we do regular episodes of What a Cartoon. For example, in June, we're covering the Disney Renaissance classic 1997's Hercules. Before that, we covered the final Ralph Bakshi film, Cool World. and we did the 20th anniversary of Shrek before that. We are closing in on 3 years of monthly What a Cartoon movies, and you will get access to all of them if you go to that premium $10 level, and you get all the $5 things Bob just talked about. Please check all of it out at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
So I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. You can find me on Twitter as Bob Servo, and my other podcast is Retronauts. It's a classic gaming podcast about old video games. Find that wherever you find podcasts, or go to patreon.com/Retronauts. Sign up there for 2 full-length bonus episodes every month. Henry, what about you?
You can find Henry Gilbert on Twitter at HENEREYG. Follow me there for all my fun takes I'm always sharing. Plus, if you're on Twitter following at HENEREYG or Bob Servo, then you really should be following at Talk Simpsons Pod. At Talk Simpsons Pod is the official Twitter account of this podcast network. When new podcasts for What a Cartoon or Talking Simpsons go out, whenever our miniseries or exclusives happen, whenever there's a poll, whenever anything happens in the world of Talking Simpsons Network, you will know because you follow at Talk Simpsons Pod on Twitter. So please do that today.
Thank you so much for joining us, folks. We'll see you next time for the Capital Critters episode, Hat and Mouse, and we'll see you then.
When the Fuehrer yells, I gotta have more shells! The Heil! For him we make more shells. If one little shell should blow him right to. He'd Heil! And wouldn't that be swell? When the Fuehrer says, "Wie ist the master race?" The Heil! Right in the Fuhrer's face. Not to love the Fuehrer is a great disgrace. So the Heil! Right in the Fuhrer's face. So the Heil! Right in the Fuhrer's face.
Grandma, can I have the chocolate chips?
This secret recipe moment made possible by Emory Heart and Vascular Center. When Grandma needed heart care, she came to Emory. The difference? Emory Healthcare performs more heart procedures annually than anyone else in Georgia, which means better outcomes for our patients. And we offer advanced and personalized treatments developed by our top specialists that others don't. Like Grandma knows, where you start your heart care matters. Smart Cookie. EmoryHealthcare.org/smartcookie.